Burnout is no joke. The Flow Research Collective defines burnout as a prolonged response to chronic emotional and interpersonal stressors. 3 criteria must be there simultaneously: exhaustion, which is overwork; cynicism, which is resentment and detachment; and inefficacy, which is involuntariness, ineffectiveness, lack of accomplishment, etc. So in other words, overwork alone will not cause burnout. If you love what you do, if you are very passionate and stay within biological limits, and these are very high, so you can pretty much be unstoppable if you work it, you will not be burnt out. That's important to know. So don't be afraid if you love what you do, and do it like honestly. But if you ever resent the activity or feel like it's beyond your control, watch out. So how do you solve the burnout? And there is a very rigorous tool in science that has been validated through 35 years of research called Maslach's Burnout Inventory. And it identifies 6 root causes, and you have to solve them one by one to be free. The first root cause can be lack of control, and the solution is to change boss or do freelance or whatever to expand your autonomy. The second root cause can be values conflict, and the solution is simply to leave the organization or transform it if you have the means to do it, because no matter how effective you become, if you do something that is totally contrarian to your values, it's not going to be sustainable at all. The third root cause, and once again, all of them that doesn't need to be there at the same time, but many of them do to cause the burnout. The third of them is insufficient reward, and the solution is to get rightfully compensated by, for instance, negotiating a pay raise or whatever. The fourth root cause is work overload, and the solution is, of course, to rest more and take days off. But do not assume that it's a core issue, because most of the time it's often the other 5. For instance, if there is a values conflict or you feel that you're not being properly respected, these are often the root causes. Because if you don't feel like you're particularly important or respected or whatever, then all this work feels like some kind of torture rather than something you do voluntarily. And it is that change, mindset change, that is the primary factor. But of course, it can be work overload too. That's not to say that it isn't there. So you have to be very honest with yourself on how it actually is. Anyway, the fifth root cause is unfairness. So the solution will then be to talk to the ones you ought to in order to resolve the situation. And yes, it's hard, but it's not going to get easier because you waited. So take the heroic stance and do what you need to do. And finally, the sixth one is breakdown of community. If there is like no real contact at all within the people you directly are responsible for or responsible to, or whatever. The solution is then to build strong feedback loops in order to get the communication going. And moreover, if you have hit the wall, then you have 3 things you mainly care about. 1, sleep as your life depended on it. 2, recover rather, like it's your job. And 3, practice gratitude. So sleep, recover, and practice gratitude. That's what you need to focus on if you have hit the wall, so to speak. Finally, I want to highlight how total living helps you forget that burnout exists. In other words, that you become maximally preventative of it and can solve it the fastest. And let's examine this burnout via the three core elements of total living, which are personal anti-fragility, hyperproductivity, and total presence. So let's start with personal anti-fragility. And it is very simply explained, it is your mindset, your way of viewing and benefiting from hardship. And in this context, see burnout as potent fuel for what's in science called post-traumatic growth. Link in the description if you want to know more. So in other words, what you have experienced or maybe will or will not experience is not going to be detrimental if you view it in the right way. You can use the stress and negativity as weapons in your arsenal and become the judo master thanks to personal anti-fragility. The second core element is hyperproductivity, which allows you to do more with less. So in other words, rest as much as possible, particularly if you are hit the wall, and do nothing. Just be, and then you will kind of detach from the situation and see the ultimate solution that will be the most productive in the end, and basically be able to execute it thanks to the increased energy reserves that you built up through your resting. And it has to be resting. And finally, total presence. It helps you to see the situation completely, without fog or fear. You will notice the resentment before it is a critical issue and act accordingly. So imagine like you have a survival cam or more of a surveillance cam, although it could be most for survival too. But the more enhanced and effective it is, like lighting out all the dust in the basement or whatever, then you will see things creep up before it's too late. And you will get the ultimate perspective and awareness of the situation. So in other words, you can achieve the ultimate mind clarity and play in your favor. And more info about total living in the link in the description.